One signature, one meeting, one arrogant phone call. That is all it took for some of the most powerful companies on earth to vaporize fortunes, hand rivals the future, and end up in business school textbooks as cautionary tales. These are not small mistakes. These are decisions so spectacularly wrong that they redrew entire industries, counting down the 10 worst business decisions ever made. Number 10. Excite passes on buying Google for $1 million. In 1999, two Stanford graduate students named Larry Page and Sergey Brin walked into the offices of Excite, then one of the largest search portals in the world. They offered to sell their fledgling search engine called Google for $750,000. Excite CEO George Bell countered down. The deal collapsed at around $1 million. At its peak market value, Google would be worth more than $2 trillion. Excite filed for bankruptcy in 2001. Number 9. Western Union dismisses the telephone. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell offered to sell his telephone patent to Western Union, the dominant telegraph monopoly, for $100,000. An internal Western Union committee reviewed the device and delivered one of the most quoted memos in corporate history. They called the telephone an electrical toy with no commercial possibilities. 2 years later, Western Union was scrambling to build their own telephone network and lost a patent war to Bell. By the mid-20th century, AT&T, the descendant of Bell Telephone, was one of the largest companies on the planet. Number 8. Yahoo turns down Google twice. In 2002, Yahoo CEO Terry Semel was offered the chance to acquire Google for $3 billion. He balked. Google's founders raised the asking price to $5 billion. Yahoo walked away. It got worse. In 2008, with Yahoo's stock collapsing, Microsoft offered to buy Yahoo for $44 billion. CEO Jerry Yang rejected the offer as too low. 6 years later, Yahoo sold its core business to Verizon for less than $5 billion. Microsoft saved itself nearly $40 billion by Yang's refusal. Number 7. Decca Records passes on the Beatles. On the 1st of January 1962, 4 young musicians from Liverpool auditioned for Decca Records executive Dick Rowe. They played 15 songs in just under an hour. Decca chose to sign a different group that day, Brian Poole and the Tremellos. Their reasoning, as later reported, was that guitar groups are on the way out. The Beatles signed with EMI's Parlophone label 6 months later. They went on to sell over 600 million records worldwide. Brian Poole and the Tremellos had a brief run of hits before fading. Decca eventually signed the Rolling Stones partially out of guilt, but the original decision is still studied as one of the worst signing calls in music history. Number 6. Quaker Oats buys Snapple. In 1994, Quaker paid $1.7 billion to acquire the iced tea and juice maker Snapple, hoping to repeat their success with Gatorade. What Quaker did not understand was that Snapple's quirky brand identity depended on being sold in small bodegas and convenience stores, not in the supermarket distribution channels. Quaker tried to force it through. Quaker also fired Snapple's beloved spokesperson Wendy Kaufman and pivoted the marketing toward mainstream advertising that fell flat. 27 months later, in 1997, Quaker sold Snapple to Triarch for $300 million, a $1.4 billion loss in roughly 2 years. Quaker's CEO William Smithberg lost his job. 3 years after that, Triarch resold Snapple for $1.5 billion, proving the brand was always valuable, just not in Quaker's hands. Number 5. Blockbuster refuses to buy Netflix. In 2000, Netflix co-founder Reed Hastings flew to Dallas to meet with Blockbuster CEO John Antioco. Netflix was hemorrhaging cash. Hastings offered to sell the entire company to Blockbuster for $50 million and to run Blockbuster's online division. According to multiple accounts of the meeting, Antioco and his team were openly amused. They laughed Hastings out of the room. 10 years later, in 2010, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. Today, Netflix is a streaming and production company worth over $250 billion. One offer, $50 million, laughed out of the room. Number 4. Kodak invents the digital camera, then buries it. In 1975, a Kodak engineer named Stephen Sayson built the world's first portable digital camera. It was the size of a toaster and captured a 100 by 100 pixel black and white image to cassette tape. Sayson presented the prototype to Kodak executives. Their response, according to Sayson himself, was that the invention was cute, but should never be shown to anyone outside the company. They feared it would cannibalize their film business. For nearly 2 decades, Kodak sat on the technology that would eventually destroy its own business. Competitors built digital cameras. Then phones absorbed cameras. In 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. They had invented their own extinction event and refused to ship it. Number 3. The AOL-Time Warner merger. In January 2000, at the very peak of the dot-com bubble, internet provider America Online announced it would acquire media giant Time Warner in a deal valued at $165 billion. It was, at the time, the largest merger in corporate history. Within 2 years, the dot-com crash had vaporized AOL's stock value. The combined company took a $99 billion goodwill write-down in 2002, one of the largest single losses in corporate history. The cultures never integrated. The technology synergies never materialized. The dial-up subscriber base AOL had paid Time Warner so much for began evaporating to broadband. In 2009, Time Warner spun AOL back off as a separate company worth a fraction of its merger valuation. Estimated total value destroyed across shareholders, over $200 billion. Number 2. Ron Wayne sells his Apple stake for $800. On the 1st of April 1976, 3 men founded Apple Computer: Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and a 41-year-old draftsman named Ron Wayne, who held a 10% stake. Wayne was the adult in the room. He drafted the original partnership agreement, designed the first Apple logo, and wrote the manual for the Apple I. 12 days after founding the company, Wayne grew nervous about being personally liable for Apple's debts. He sold his 10% stake back to Jobs and Wozniak for $800. He later accepted an additional $1,500 to formally surrender any future claims. At Apple's peak market capitalization above $3 trillion, that 10% stake would have been worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Wayne has said in numerous interviews that he does not regret the decision, citing his own peace of mind. The financial loss, regardless of his feelings, remains the most consequential equity sale in modern history, and the #1 worst business decision in history. IBM lets Microsoft keep the rights to MS-DOS. In 1980, IBM was racing to build a personal computer. They needed an operating system fast. They approached a small Seattle software company called Microsoft, run by a 24-year-old Bill Gates. Gates did not even have an operating system. He bought one from another company for $50,000, polished it, and licensed it to IBM. But here is the catastrophic clause IBM agreed to. IBM did not require exclusive rights to MS-DOS. Microsoft was free to license the same operating system to any other computer maker. IBM's lawyers focused on hardware. They did not see the software as the strategic asset. Within 5 years, dozens of PC manufacturers were licensing MS-DOS. IBM-compatible clones flooded the market. IBM had created the standard but did not own it. By 1990, IBM was being outshipped in PCs by Compaq, Dell, and a half-dozen clone makers. By 2005, IBM had sold its entire PC business to Lenovo. Microsoft, meanwhile, used the MS-DOS cash flow to build Windows, then Office, then the cloud business. Today, Microsoft is worth over $3 trillion. IBM is worth roughly 1/20th of that. One non-exclusive clause, one overlooked sentence. It built the largest software company in history and broke the dominance of the largest computer company in history. The single most consequential business decision ever made was not signing something. It was failing to require exclusivity on a single piece of paper. 10 decisions, hundreds of billions of dollars destroyed. Each one looked reasonable in the boardroom on the day it was made. That is the lesson every business student eventually learns. The catastrophic call rarely feels catastrophic at the time. It feels like a normal Tuesday meeting.